Hey, Adam.
What's up?
You hungry, man?
I'm very hungry.
I'm starving.
Let's
man.
make this quick.
Okay, cool.
I'm Adam Maness.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear It podcast.
Daily jazz advice coming at you.
Some advice and some controversy coming at you today. We have a speak pipe, and it's about 21st century jazz politics. We're talking a little bit of sexism. We're talking about a little race. It's going to be an interesting...
Racism or just race?
We'll find out.
Okay,
it's going to
cool.
be two white guys talking about jazz, so it should be
We're
good.
going to dictate exactly how... Yeah, this is good.
Two straight white men talking about jazz. It'll be great.
Okay.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Oxford American. Go to oxfordamerican.org/YHI for some great deals. They deal with some politics over there too, but it's always really thoughtful, really well done, and really relevant to what I believe most jazz musicians are interested in. So definitely go to oxfordamerican.org/YHI for some great deals.
So you're saying they don't step in it like we may be about to step in. I haven't heard that you
my-
pre-screen the... You got some boots on?
I got my bright white shoes on,
yeah, you better
so
not step
if I
in it.
step in it, it's going to be noticeable.
I got my black Adidas.
You'll be fine.
Adidas. Okay.
This is a voice message.
A voice message.
This is a speak pipe from Eric.
Hey, Peter and Adam. I'm a fan of the podcast. I've been following on the YouTubes for about 2 or 3 months now. I have a question for you if you want to dive into politics and political correctness. I'm wondering how you guys think jazz should be interpreted and applied to the 21st century with respect to the Me Too movement and with sensitivities to a cultural appropriation. I think of examples like how insensitive the lyrics are in some songs. Like Baby It's Cold Outside is a good example, which is basically about a guy trying to get his date drunk and stay the night, with lyrics like, I simply must go, and the answer is no, but yet he's still persistent. Back in the day, maybe it was viewed as charming. Today, maybe it's viewed as creepy. Should we stop playing songs because of the contents of the lyrics? Thanks a lot for what you guys do.
All right, Eric,
great
thank
question.
you. That's a great question. And we are not going to deal... No. No, okay. First of all, thank you, Eric. This is why we are both pianists. We never play lyrics. We might play these songs, but we refuse to play any controversial lyrics. Right?
I think so. Yeah, I do, man.
It does make it easier. Look, for vocalists, this is a very real issue.
Well, yeah,
Love for Sale.
Love for Sale is rough. Love for Sale is rough. Cherokee is
even the title. Come on.
I actually feel weird even playing Cherokee instrumental now. I'm going to put that out there. It's a weird concept for today's person.
Yeah, and so look, first of all, I want to say this though is in a little bit of a pre-defense of jazz in general, and even saying jazz is controversial.
I agree that
we've talked about that before.
We say it every day, but it is weird.
Daily jazz podcast. We have to say it because that's our tagline. But this is the thing. Okay. Yeah, Baby It's Cold Outside, Cherokee, these are not only politically incorrect and insensitive by today's standards, but even before today. Maybe not when they were written, it was more accepted just because of everything. But that doesn't mean it was right just because it was accepted at that time. So there needs to be correction of this. But let's not come too hard on jazz musicians because we have other genres that are still writing lyrics like this, that are very, very offensive to groups, very misogynist and that kind of a thing.
True.
And so it's never, but that's like, people want to attack hip-hop, which becomes really like a racial kind of attack in a way by trying to bring in these other things. These are misogynist, but that's just certain parts of that.
Yeah.
So you can never, I don't think, we should be careful to go with too broad of a stroke, but I like this idea of like talking about specific things and how can we fix our approach to this. And as he said, 21st century. We should be, we're far into the 21st century now.
Oh,
And jazz has been, with sticking to all this charm of the past, slow on a lot of these issues, I think.
Well, man, the good news on all of this is the kids fix it for us, right?
That's right.
It's like the kids have already decided that even our generation, put up with and added too much BS
Right.
to jazz and didn't allow things to happen that should have happened. And they're already fixing it by what they listen to and what they don't care about and care about.
Right.
I'm thinking about women in jazz. Like, it's so different now than it was even when we were coming up.
Yeah.
For me, my favorite saxophone player is Melissa Aldana right now. I think she's doing things that are
she's great.
far and beyond almost everybody else. And like, it wasn't as prominent where she would be touring around even 25 years ago. And that's crazy to think about. So I think it's kind of exciting. And I think there's, there are ways that I think, men in jazz can things that men in jazz can do to even help this advance more. And that's by playing, promoting, listening to women in jazz. And it's luckily there's more opportunity to do that than there ever has been before, and hopefully more to come.
Yeah, and I think an important thing that many have been doing, and we've been very supportive and doing a little bit ourselves, and need to do more of, is supporting and promoting the current generation of female artists, because there has been such an inequity in the past. But also going back and realizing there's a rich history of females in jazz that are not only contributors but originators of this music.
Absolutely.
Lil Hardin, Mary Lou Williams, and of course I'm going towards pianists and stuff. But you go all the way back to the beginning, obviously Shirley Horn, and then we can talk about all the singers, which is obvious. But I mean instrumentalists.
There's so many that they are just left out of the history of the music, and it needs to change for sure. The history books need to change.
Yeah,
I think it was our friend of the show. Why am I spacing? She was a guest on our show. She's our friend.
Tia Fuller. Yeah. She's an amazing musician, great saxophonist, great teacher. But go ahead.
No, she had done this whole article on the history of women in jazz and some that have been left off the list, and it was incredible to read. So check that out.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that we never want to just wash away the sins of the past in terms of what jazz musicians have done. We want to embrace, look, we're part of this music and everything, and mistakes were made in a number of different ways. And he brought up cultural appropriation. That's, American pop culture was really built on the foundation, the wrong foundation of culture appropriation in so many ways.
Yeah.
Jazz, in some ways, I think, was sort of a beacon around that. You look back to the time when people were taking, white artists became huge. And I'm not even talking about like the Rolling Stones and stuff where they kind of honored their roots and acknowledged it.
Yeah.
In terms of coming from blues. But
you're talking about straight up theft.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about Elvis Presley. I think Elvis Presley at times.
Paul Whiteman, that whole thing.
Right. Notice his name, White Man.
Well,
see how that goes.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, so there's a history of that. But when we look at jazz, there's also a lot of sort of beacons of, you're talking about Benny Goodman's integrated band, Miles Davis having, integrated bands. And I mean, it wasn't as big of a thing then, but I mean, you saw some very real integration in the music from the beginning. I mean, you talk about going back to New Orleans and stuff in a way that was not the norm.
I mean, I always think on this about the generosity of the early masters of this music, and still today, and of African American culture, that like, could you imagine maybe some other forms of music that are just like, let's all play together and take it and let's do it. You know what I mean? Like the generosity of spirit of the African American musicians that really created this music is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I mean, you had, and look, we're no experts on this outside of, I think, kind of our understanding of the music and being, white musicians playing a music that's still predominantly, I don't know, we never really talk about predominantly African American. We talk about the history, the origins of it being based upon the African American music experience in this country and these kind of things.
Yeah.
But now it's just like, we're part of something that is not based upon anything until you start to look at it in this context. But what you had at that time, which was very different than what we came up with, was, black artists that were leading bands that maybe had, it was like the opposite of, say, the classical world, where you'd have an orchestra with maybe one black or two black musicians. Yeah. Whereas you had like, the African American leader of a group and then like one white musician or something. Like that was not normal.
Yeah.
I mean, even up to like when Bill Evans was playing with Miles and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it did, look, we're not perfect as jazz musicians and all that. I mean, there's been a lot of racism, sexism and all this.
Totally.
But at our best, we've been like, where the people, where we really had that spirit of like, whatever the music, demands. It's not about race. And this was at a time when race was, I mean, look, it's still all up in our face because it's not solved in this country.
Yeah.
But this was at a time when it was real, and there was real problems, and there was a real, kind of feel, go even more tribal. Everybody goes separate and everything. And so jazz was a beacon with that. I mean, you talk about, Dave Brubeck and Miles Davis. These guys were big stars.
Yeah.
And they had integrated bands, and like that just wasn't seen much.
Well, and it's a tribute to the amazing inclusive spirit of these African American musicians who didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And were, and it's a gift to
Louis
all
Armstrong.
of us. Louis Armstrong. I mean, I don't know about you, but I am very conscious of the Black American experience in regards to jazz, and I try to respect that in everything I do with the music, and try to honor that.
Yeah. But the thing is, I think that I don't even know if we've ever talked about this. It's interesting to do it here. It's kind of like, maybe we should go over to the couch. It's kind of like a therapy session.
But I
for
think
us.
it's important for white musicians to talk about it because
Right.
it's a part of the history of the music. You
Yeah.
know? And I think it's our responsibility to help lift up that side of it.
It is. Yeah. And I think because we come from that kind of spirit with this, that, I'm never worried about cultural appropriation because there's not I'm worried, like it happens a lot, but I'm saying for me, or in terms of like, my connection with the music or what we're doing, because I just don't look at it that way. I don't look like, let me take this and do that. Like I've been part of this, and that is, I think what you're referring to, that's like a gift. And I'm so happy to be a part of that. But I'm also like, I'm a contributor to that. And like I do that with a clean heart or whatever. And there's a lot of, we all bring our experience. I mean, this country's so screwed up. I mean, we know this. And like, I kind of was raised in a very idyllic situation that's unusual in this country, in that I grew up in integrated, schools and things like that. I mean, they had their own problems.
No, University City's diverse, especially back in the day.
Yeah. And so you bring a certain perception, and then you're like, why? And then when you get in the real world, you're like, wow, people don't think that everybody's equal. Oh, and people aren't treated equally? What,
Yeah.
And so, we all bring to it what we will. But I would just say that, like, my experience with, really 99% of the jazz musicians in terms of race has been super, like, chill and, like, positive. It's just really non-issue. Not to say that there isn't that there. It's just I've been kind of lucky in terms of my experience, Now, in terms of the sexism, the misogyny, these kind of things, that's a much bigger problem.
It's very real.
That's very real.
Current problem.
Very
for
current.
Sure.
But I think I'm seeing like the institutions really, really kind of not necessarily leading the way, but getting on the bandwagon pretty quick.
And the kids,
which they've had to.
Thank God for young musicians
because of the kids,
who are pushed back big time on this. Like, shout out to all of you who are doing that.
And we learn stuff from them. Like when we're on gigs, they're like, you kind of say something that we're used to saying that's not horrible, but it's like, no, that's not really cool. And that's what it's supposed to be about. You got to move ahead.
Yeah, and shame on older cats for not calling it out sooner. You know what I mean? I think we all have to.
Exactly.
I mean, the culture is where it is, but we all have to be responsible for this.
But jazz musicians are really good at like pivoting quickly, so that's been good. Like we've seen some serious changes. Like you got to acknowledge there's a problem, and I think we've gotten to that. Not everybody, obviously, and for when you're older, but it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, part of our thing is improvising and moving fast and stuff. So y'all just get it right. You know what I'm saying?
Man, well, I feel like we stepped in it a little bit for sure.
Don't worry, this will never air. This will never never make it past the you'll hear it advisory panel.
It is interesting to talk about in this context, though, because it's a little prickly, I think, for a couple of middle-aged straight white guys to talk about things like this. I mean, we didn't even get into like gay jazz musicians, which is a whole other thing we could have talked about in our great expertise as white guys.
Well, I think that some white guys are gay, just so you know. That's not like white, gay, black, female. There's a little bit of overlap there, just so you know. Whoa, you're turning red.
Well, no, I've been red this whole time. No, but I think it's, these are important conversations that we have to have because, like it or not, we do have a voice that gets heard in this for whatever reason or another, and it's up to us to lift those voices who maybe aren't being heard as much.
Okay, so now we're going to go ultimate tip today, right? We're going to jump right to the ultimate tip.
Which is?
Well, this is something that you mentioned before, but I want to really highlight this, and if folks don't take anything more away from this, first of all, know that we did not plan any of this, like we don't plan any of this, so we don't have any kind of agenda. It's just kind of speaking for our hearts. But I think this concept of, the responsibility that white musicians in this music do have is to speak up more forcefully about, like racism and sexism and these kind of things. I mean, everybody should be speaking up about this, but I think that we need to say the kind of things like what you said in terms of like, being grateful for the gift of being part of this and acknowledging, the origins of the music. It shouldn't just be black musicians. It shouldn't just be Nicholas Payton saying this is black American music and like making an issue about
it should
these
be white
things.
musicians.
Yeah,
This is
and it's not about jazz. I mean, that's a whole nother issue. I'm talking about like acknowledging the reality of what the music. Well, we all know it, which is natural when we're all talking and hanging out of it. But it shouldn't be when you get in front of the camera or you get into a public state. All of a sudden, it's different.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It is an amazing.
Or like we should be quiet and like okay,
It's an amazing gift. These brilliant artists with this history of being oppressed still allow people, in some cases, their oppressors in on this beautiful gift, and we should acknowledge that and respect that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, till tomorrow.
You'll hear it.